What we've been taught in our schools is that we live in a free country. But when you stop to think about it, we really don't. How so? If we don't do certain things like pay taxes, we'll be sent to jail. If we do other certain things that harm no one, like smoke weed in the wrong state, guess what? We'll be sent to jail. This is where the idea of libertarianism comes into play. But first, a quick and simple history. Like most modern ideas, this one came about during the 17th century and was meant to cure the unfairness that has plagued our world since the very beginning. You see, during this time, people began to get sick of being poor while making rich people richer. What I mean by this is that most people at this time were ruled by some sort of lord and paid their lords with work and taxes in the form of money, food, supplies, and whatever they were making. A man named Thomas Paine said, for example, that there are two distinct classes of men in the nation: those who pay taxes and those who receive and live upon the taxes. So the idea of libertarianism really came about just like the ideas of socialism and capitalism. It was a way to figure out how to make things fair. And in a nutshell, it's that you get to keep what you earn instead of giving a portion of it to others. Now, just like socialism and capitalism, there are hundreds of different thoughts and ideas about how to best practice this. But for the sake of this video, we're going to look at what it means in the United States. In fact, in most other parts of the world, the term is more closely related to socialism, while here in the US, it's more closely related to the term free market capitalism. The exact meaning of libertarianism is to liberate or to defend freedom. And it is based on the assumption that there is a natural harmony between productive people, in that it's only when the government intervenes, takes a portion of what we earn, and hands out rewards where we begin to get into conflict. Think about it like this. Libertarians believe in this idea called the non-aggressive principle, or NAP for short. This means that any law that a government makes should not be a law that coerces people into following its rules if those rules don't apply to protecting other people's natural rights. An example of a violation of this is taxes. Why? Because like I said before, if you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail. In other words, the government is coercing you to pay up, and if you don't, there are some pretty severe consequences. Sounds pretty aggressive, right? In terms of economic policy, libertarians favor the freedom of the economy to do what it wants, rather than regulate it with coercive laws. This means removing all but the most necessary taxes to make a society work. Libertarians want to get rid of Social Security, welfare, etc., while just having the bare necessities like a police force, firefighters, and whatever else you need to create a functioning society. In terms of social policy, it favors the idea that you can basically do whatever it is you want to do as long as you are not violating another person's natural rights. For example, the government shouldn't be able to regulate your choices in life like smoking weed or marrying a person of the same sex. And as far as who we should punish and put into jail, simple. Anyone who violates the rights of another individual, like murderers, rapists, and thieves. So this all sounds pretty straightforward, but you may ask yourself why it hasn't caught on to the mainstream public. There are a number of reasons. One simply being that the Democrats and Republicans literally own the commission on presidential debates. This means that they basically get to choose who gets to debate during a presidential candidacy. And why would a Republican or a Democrat want more competition? But there are other reasons too. First, there is yet to be a country that has tried to implement this idea of libertarianism. You'd think that if it was such a good idea that at least one country would have tried it. Second, many critics say that it sounds like a good idea, but they wonder how it would work practically. Meaning, if businesses were no longer regulated, how would monopolies stop from being formed? Or when people are too old to work and have little savings or expensive healthcare bills, how could they live comfortably in retirement? Third, libertarianism in the US is basically founded on this idea of the non-aggressive principle. The problem with this is that many economists believe that having a non-regulated free market economy is a system that creates aggressive coercion all by itself. How? Simple, and here's one example. It doesn't address the conflict between property owners and renters. If there is no governmental regulation to people's property rights or property owners' rights, then one day you might wake up and say to yourself that you aren't going to pay the rent this month because your landlord just raised it 50%. Of course, the property owner isn't going to allow that and will use some sort of, most likely aggressive coercion to get their rent. Fourth, there is an assumption in libertarianism that economic growth also grows the happiness of people. But this assumption hasn't been proven with science. This is called the Easterlin paradox, named after a guy who studied this kind of stuff and found that during a great period of economic expansion in the US between 1946 and 1970, there was no increase in happiness. Fifth, there are environmental criticisms because if we don't regulate our businesses, there is no clear way to make sure they make environmentally responsible decisions. In response, libertarians often say that people wouldn't purchase products from businesses that are unethical. But the fact is that we already do. Libertarianism seems like a great idea. It's all about providing the maximum amount of freedom to the individual while protecting their individual rights. But the question still remains about how to best implement a system like this in a way that would protect the freedom and the rights of every individual. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, hit the like button below, and share this motherfucker.